This panel really came from confronting the question, the science is so clear, as Dr. Potasnak explained. The impact is already evident, as I think Carl really illustrated very movingly. And yet, why are we not acting on this? What is holding back society from acting in any way commensurate with the real devastation today and the danger all that poses for humanity on a global scale? So that's where this panel came from, and our speakers are going to address different aspects of that from different perspectives. And first, we're going to hear from Barney Bush. He's a Native American poet, author, musician, and activist. He's a member of the Shawnee and Cayuga tribes and is currently the chairman of the Vineyards Indian Settlement in Southeast Illinois. And he came up here today to be part of this conference. He's a critical author in the Native American Renaissance. He holds a BA in Humanities and a dual MA in English and Fine Arts from the University of Idaho. He has taught Native American history and literature at any number of colleges in the US and lectured here around the country and abroad. He is currently involved in the fight to stop fracking, coal mining, drilling, and hilltop removal throughout his tribe's Ohio River homelands. And there's more information available at his website, barneybushpoet.com, but here you're going to hear directly from him.
Thank you very much for inviting me here. Are you able to hear me? Well, maybe it's for the best. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, I'm going to have to bend a little, I think. My name is Barney Bush. I'm a Kishbakofa Shawnee. We're currently in the process, too, of resurrecting our community that started falling apart back in 1953. We're bringing back ceremonies from Oklahoma to piece by piece to help resurrect our community and to save our homelands. Our community became more dysfunctional in the 50s because of the coal mining that was happening down in the southeastern part of Illinois. And when I was 12, 13 years old, I saw all the shapes of my homeland that I had played in and connected with, the rivers we swam in and fished in, rode our horses into, the gardens we planted, all of that beautiful valley go under the strip mine shovels, all of it for eternity. Everything that I know about my homeland and the place where I grew up and the shapes, everything is left in my mind. My own children never got to see that. Never got to see the cleanliness and the beauty in which we lived. I'm a Bear Clan Shawnee, Makwa Miyakotsat, Obawaka Moho Piatsat. We are returning our, as I said, we're returning our ceremonies back from Oklahoma. We have 3 ceremonies that were remaining, and we still do those, and that's the midwinter that we just had. We have the Wild Onion Festival coming up in April, and we have Reconnection Days in September. And in September, we'll be hosting an indigenous teenage poetry gathering down in southeastern Illinois, and everyone's invited to attend. And there'll be readings and discussions about the environment and those sorts of things. There'll probably be, we expect, at least 50 kids and maybe more from around the Indian country. Eichmann, according to one of his henchmen, said just before the German collapse that he would leap laughing into his grave because the feeling that he had 5 million people on his conscience would be for him a source of extraordinary satisfaction. In 1492, according to Padre de las Casas, a priest aboard Columbus's ship who kept a journal of this expedition and the entry into what they lovingly refer to as the New World, that he estimated from 3 to 8 million people died from disease, murder, and suicide within that short period of time. 3 to 8 million people. And so that begins They came into this country, as Columbus writes, for gold, slaves, that sort of thing. That whole colonial empire kind of thing has been rampant in the world. As you know from studying your accurate history and perhaps your more likely your inaccurate history. Columbus wrote in his own journals that I read when I was a fellow at the Newberry Library here in Chicago back in 1984, that he said, and it's not a direct quote exactly, but he said that the people are so kind that and generous toward us. They bring us fresh water daily. They bring us pearls from the sea. They bring us food. He said, if God has any children left on the face of this earth, los niños indios, he says, surely these are the children of God. They'll make good slaves. So that tells you something about the logic. Write this down in your notes, kids. The word logic, I've taught school a lot. Logic, the term logic, that tells you how the Western European thought at the time, that the acts of generosity were the acts of children, that God only saw, that God saw these people as children of God. Los niños indios, originally that's how come we got to be called Indians. It wasn't because he thought there was no India back in 1492. The country was called Hindustan. So they didn't call us Hindustanians. They called us Indians, from the word indios. And the people said that 3 years later that they needed to do something about the murders and massacres they're reporting from the New World, that people are starting to complain about such murders. So the Catholic diocese at the time decided to rename us and call us like the heathen of the West Indies, call us Indians. That would help cover over that, los indios. So we have a history of colonialism throughout the world that has, it's damaged us. It's damaged our homelands. It's, today, people say, oh, back in the days of colonialism. What the hell? Colonialism is still going on. It's still continuing. It's still taking our lands. This colonial system has moved its system into the Middle East, colonizing the countries of Iraq and Afghanistan and other countries in which they need to get out. And someone asked me today, or we were talking, and they said, I don't think it's right to ask that the white people leave the Americas, you know, that it's not, no, they didn't say it was right. It said, it's not reality. I think if you hope long enough that the people who don't love this land get out, that's a legitimate hope. If you love this land and you have a love for the sunlight and the clouds, the breathing, to be able to breathe the air, to be able to drink the water, to be able to plant in the earth with impunity, without the fear of the death chemicals that are put into the earth, into the air. We have 2,000 trips of coal trucks going past the Vineyard Indian Settlement every day. That's all of that, what do you call it, diesel fumes in the air. We don't have bugs anymore. We don't have honeybees. We have people with respiratory problems. We have things happening to the health of children along those routes. We also have the mass digging up of our graves, of old graveyards, old Native American graveyards, which are not quite considered as legitimate as white graveyards. That's still part of the colonization of America. People have told me that in the coal mines there, and we tell them ahead of time that that is a burial ground, to leave it alone. And they dig those, and the people say in those shovels, sometimes they dump over and they see skulls, the skulls and bones of people being dumped into the earth. This is a civilized people. Don't try and pass that off. Don't try and pass off to me that Jesus came across on a boat of immigrants in 1492. If that was a Jesus, I want no part of that. No part of it. That religion has been such a destructive force in colonization, or I should say an effective force, in coming to this country and to separate people and to confuse people and to take away kids and put kids in boarding schools throughout the Americas and rape, screw, you know, whatever you want to do with an Indian kid because his parents are not there, you know, to protect him or her. That I can't, people say about forgiving. I can be a forgiving people. I had a kid approach me. I was in France doing with a concert with Tony Hymas and some other people. And this guy came up to me and he says, could I have some time with you, Mr. Bush, after you get through with the reporters and everything? I said, sure. And in my mind, I'm not an idiot. I can see a messianic approach when it comes to me. And I thought, what's going on? But I was curious. And his people had immigrated to Canada from France and had been around the Okanagans and some other tribal peoples. And he says, do you think the Native Americans will ever forgive the white man for what he's done? And I thought a minute and I said, strange question. Then he said, set the trap, even Jesus forgave sinners. I said, man, you should never have messed with me because I've read all of that. I know what it says. There's only one time that he ever forgave sinners in a blank thing. That's when he's on the cross, if all this actually happened. He says, forgive them because they don't know what the hell they're doing. And the other times, he had two reasons. He had two requirements. First of all, you had to be sorry for what you did. You had to be sorry. If it's destroying the earth and destroying the air, you need to be sorry for what you're doing. Then number two, you have to go on your way, get up off your knees or wherever you are, and never do it again. Don't ever do it again. That sounds pretty simple to me. Nobody gets forgiving from me until those two requirements are made out. Not that I have a Jesus complex or anything, but... But it's been used against us for so long, this religious business. And so I decided in studying, when I work with my students who have been captives of the Mormons and other of these European cults, actually Mormonism is not, it's a colonial American-born cult that 12-year-old kid saw Jesus, or the angel. And things like this bother me. This is out of our local down-home newspaper, the Hardin County Independent, comes out once a week. And you didn't see this in any other papers. Congressmen to co-chair Congressional Coal Caucus. Representatives John Shimkus and Bill Enhart will co-chair the Congressional Coal Caucus to promote Southern Illinois coal and good jobs. Do you know that the town of Kingman, Arizona is entirely wind energy generated? The whole town. Germany's almost all solar, as well as Scotland. And why I don't hear enough of this replacement energy, I keep telling when I go to give talks with these environmentalists where coal people are present, I say, you can still rip us off. You can still charge us high prices for energy, but you can do it with less damage to the earth and to the water. The solar, the geothermal, and the wind energy is working. And people say, oh, well, yeah, but those are ugly things on the land. Well, look at a strip mine. How ugly can you get? How ugly can you get? It's destroying our homelands. An evolutionary moment in the present. My heart turns toward its first beat, encasing a first image of magnificence, a first memory of this world. Old, all folks still bear memory cells floating through blood, here and there, still ducking and dodging the terror in our homelands, still drilling into El Madre, still slitting into her guts, engorging her veins with the mix of discordant chemicals, discordant education, still severing ties with flesh and blood, the names of the high winds with the grandfathers of when life was sacred, the mothers and fathers of rain, anything still holy in a native heart, still taking the beatings of financial razor straps. And our kids struggle to resist financially, just like everyone else who is employed at sucking blood from the earth, moving into every virgin mound, our own clan mystery about how our medicine disappeared because I had ignored it for way too long. Each entity, a movie version of Back into Time, of when it was harder, when rumors came into the earth that told us to wake up, that what we do with our elders embarrasses me, and hurts like the earth when it doesn't hear any good words, words from elders who are force-dropped into fundamental nursing homes of America and forget how to speak, quieted at night by hush drugs. Make something out of that. Make it quickly. It has to be better than this. The pleadings throughout the floors. Take me home, Lord. Take me home, Lord. Take me home, Lord. Take me home, Lord. Take me. Get me out of here. I want to go home. Take me home. Please, please, please. Somebody's going to pay for this. You wait and see. The elder man threatens from his restrained self in a wheelchair. No one goes to talk with him because the woman is yelling, take me home, take me home. I've sent the boys for the horses. Help me, help me, help me. You sons of bitches is going to pay for this. You watch. Son, don't let me die in here, his mother pleads. Forget it, Mom. We're assimilated now. Why, them elders ain't worth nothing. What do you do with them when you ain't home? Drop them off. They don't want us to be burdened with them, I hear them say. And I go, what the are you talking about? Let me see. Were you too busy with your kids? Gave them everything for which they asked or cried? Did you speak to their hearts? Or did you forget? Or were you deprived of experience? Never got to talk with the earth, the rainwater, or the lightning? Never had a talk with wild things, the way the word is used in English? Never had the blessings of the river? Never had a talk with the side that you call out to in the forest? That is us. We are the romantics of the forest. We are those. We always arch gracefully when ducking limbs and make sinister shadows across the drumbeats of the stars. We are romantic and healthy from eating barely warmed wild red meat, lots of nuts and berries, and dishpans filled with combs of the wildest honey. Damn straight, we are romantic impersonators. Keeps us from the nursing homes, wastelands of America, songs we waited too long to sing, to act upon, bloody arguments to contain the vanities of colonial souls. It's pretty hard to lock up the oldest souls, the last of generations committed to living in peace within whatever stage of evolution currently engulfs the world. What I'm saying here, or what is being said here, is that in order to have people understand what is happening in the earth, you got to teach it to your kids. It has to be passed on. Those kids have to feel the earth. You can't just read it in a book or see it on a film or watch it on a slide. You got to have kids entwined with those feelings. They got to be able to swim in clean water. I swam in clean water when I was growing up. I could swim down into the water, and I remember one time, I loved the act of being able to fly. I fantasized, you know, Superman and all that when I was a kid. But I would soak myself down under the water, and I would become so still I was floating. And one time I looked to my right, and there was an alligator gar who was just right alongside me. And the sunlight was coming down through the water on the both of us. And I was at peace, and so was the gar. It was a wonderful moment. It reminded me of the freedom of our history in this land. What's happening now down in southern Illinois near the Vineyard Indian Settlement, the land that we have now is not part of the original Vineyard Indian Settlement. The Anglo folks will not sell that land to us. They sell it to other white folks who are building up tourist resorts. Is it time? Okay. So what's happening is we have a man next to us who has accidentally sold land to a fracking company. He signed a check that he got in the mail. The 5 years went up on it, and they have a right to renew it. And so what I've had to do, they've said they're going to frack down in there, and I said, that's our water. Our water comes from the mountain. That spring is the holiest spring water you've ever tasted in your life. It's pure. There's nothing in between us and the source. And I said, I've had to say publicly, if that fracking sets up near our land, we have to be prepared to defend ourselves. Without water, we're dead, and it's possible that if we fight for our water, we'll still be dead. That's what it's come to in this America. And I have said, and I have announced, that anyone who comes in to frack and ruin our water down in there will be met with armed resistance. And as I was talking this morning in the car over here, the mention was made that what they'll make this look like is that I'm some sort of eccentric terrorist in this land. But we have to watch and be able to protect ourselves from the labels that these corporations put on us. The terrorism is already here. The terrorism is upon the water, upon the earth, and upon the sky. A little more Christianity for those of you here who need a dose. Revelations 11:18. The nations were angry, and your wrath has come. The time has come for judging the dead and for rewarding your servants, the prophets, and your saints, and those who reverence your name, both small and great, and for destroying those who destroy the earth. Oh. I would like to thank my host, Barbara, for putting me up in her very welcome house and her very welcome, generous spirit, and her son who brought us over here this morning. Very, very nice people.
Thank you. And that was just the opener. Our next speaker is Dr. Robert Goldstein. He's an ordained Lutheran minister who has served congregations in San Francisco, New Jersey, and here in Chicago. He has his master's in divinity and STM degrees from Yale and his PhD from Princeton Theological. And he's long been a proponent of equal rights for women and LGBT people in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. He is now working on a book on God's non-existence. Here's Bob.
Wow.
Well, talk about someone to follow. My name is Bob Goldstein. I'm a Lutheran pastor. Okay. Now, here's a little Jewish boy whose mother was Irish, whose father was Jewish, being a Lutheran pastor from Australia. Now, what I want to communicate with you on that is that you've got to break assumptions about religion. Our dear friend here, Barney, spoke so eloquently about what I just as much hate and despise about religion's history, its structures, and its power. I can only ask you to give me a moment to hear something more radical about religions, plural, today. Okay? What I want to talk to you about is the language of the heart, okay, rather than the thoughts of the head. Obviously, I'm going to speak logically to you, I hope, and that, but I'm going to be talking about assumptions, because this is what religion is really all about, is assumptions. I know there's a lot of baggage in religion, particularly with institutions and structures. And I want to tell you, first of all, that all human institutions, particularly religious institutions, are stupid. Okay? Human beings, they're only organizations of human beings. They start off with very honorable intent to transmit values from one generation to another, but they often turn into bumbling idiots, just like our government today. Okay? We are experiencing in the West something very good happening, and that is what's called technically the disestablishment of the church. And what that means is simply that the state is separating itself gradually from the Western churches. This is good, because then this makes the churches have to make it on their own and not live in the arrogance and assumption of state power behind them. And the history for 1,700 years of Christianity has been since Emperor Constantine read the winds and saw that the Christian movement was taking over his empire. Like a good politician, he suddenly was converted. And to show he was converted, he lifted his Roman sword, the gladius, And the gladius, the shape of the gladius at the top was a cross. And that's the horrible story that went on for 1,700 years and is at last beginning to break apart. And I welcome it. I guess you know I'm not always very welcome at the bishop's office on this sort of stuff. Now, I want to talk about assumptions we grow up with, because they're important. They're about the heart. They're sort of the things we live with. As an Australian kid, white kid, I grew up just assuming that Elizabeth II was some wonderful queen to whom I felt allegiance. Now that I live in Wrigleyville, I've met plenty of other queens, which I show more allegiance. We Aussies assumed that the land of Australia was ripe for development and use. Unlimited optimism abounded, with a population of 7 million in the size of the United States, the continental United States. It was unbounded in possibilities, and science and technology were to be our tools to tear up the earth, build new factories and housing developments. The first Australians, often known as the Aboriginals, saw the earth as their mother, and they saw this as raping their mother. I think they had it right. But this was the cultural meme or the cultural assumption of most of the Western world until the publication in 1962 of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. The title referred to the destructive effects of pesticide on wildlife. She also added another aspect, the disinformation put out by the chemical industry. You may be aware recently that the paper in this town, Tribune, had an expose of the chemical industry hiding the damages from the so-called fireproof of furniture. It wasn't fireproof, but they kept the lie going for the purpose of money. Now, our cultural assumptions that we hold often have dark structures of industrial, political, and economic power that underwrite those assumptions and reinforce them. 50 years later, that silent spring has turned into the roar of superstorms and firestorms, extreme floods and extreme droughts. And we're all gathered here to change that assumption, that meme, to change the assumptions of our cultures, and to confront the powers that I can assure you will fight to keep those assumptions in force. Now, let me try and bring a religious aspect to the cultural assumptions. Because we had to change the assumptions requires a deeper understanding than even science can bring, although I have a great respect for science. In the West, as I said, we're seeing now the disintegration of church and state. But behind that was included an accepted common interpretation of Scripture on the use of nature. And it is this interpretation is that humankind has total dominion over nature, as it says in the book of Genesis, to freely exploit nature as we see fit. This church-state assumption of dominion still holds forth, especially today in fundamentalist and many evangelical religious traditions. You see, in those traditions, in those cultures in the Southwest and other places, there's a definite religious character to being in business there. Bible-based religious social communities. In fact, sometimes it's hard to distinguish between them. The business-savvy preachers often create these mega-churches. So-called secular business sales promotion meetings can take on the character of revivals with prayers, testimonials of how our particular product has really changed lives, and exhortations to members of the company to go out as missionaries to sell the products. So in some circles, religion and business are two sides of the same coin. We need to understand this. Therefore, even if you could help them deconstruct the past interpretation of dominion, change their view of what dominion should mean, you also must understand that you're threatening their livelihood. Oh. Now, let me talk about the theological reform of the doctrine of nature. Many theologians of the church have been thoughtfully deconstructing the doctrine of dominion since the publication of Silent Spring 50 years ago. 20 years ago, the church I represent, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, issued a social statement called Environment, Caring for Creation, Vision, Hope, and Justice, which has provided a teaching resource for parishes and Lutheran colleges and schools to look at the old assumptions and to inculcate a sense of stewardship instead of exploitation. And by stewardship, I mean we have been giving something from God, this beautiful nature, to take care of, to caress, to love, not to rape. Therefore, even if you could, excuse me, I jumped. I'm getting a little excited. All right. Now, the Episcopal Church is one of many mainline denominations educating their members about the stewardship of nature, now become the crisis of nature. So in progressive religious traditions, Christian traditions, and Jewish traditions, there is a lot being done to educate and change the notion of dominion as not something to destroy, but rather as a responsibility to nurture. Now, there are biblical verses that contribute to this, what I've alluded to, particularly in the book of Genesis. There, humans are given dominion over the earth. Of course, the word dominion can be lived out in many different ways. But the most common understanding of dominion historically and lived out has been to dominate and therefore to exploit the earth. When this text was written, however, context. It was in the context of small tribal peoples and some larger political entities. Domination meant harvesting the seas, the land, and the animals for survival. Sustainability came by default. But with the growing technology of the West in the last 300 years, that scale of harvesting has become enormous and was coupled to the motive of sheer capitalist profit. So successful were these methods of production that the survival assumption dropped out. Populations began exploding, and profiting by the capitalist and socialist cultures have wiped away the concept of sustainability. Fishing areas are disappearing. Domination became thoughtless and greedy destruction. So when you see a verse in the Bible, you must find out what it meant as best as we can when it was written, as well as the history of interpretation, of disastrous interpretation that we've seen. Now, the modern church teaches that Jesus, yes, I am a representative of Jesus, Barney, turned the common understanding of dominion on its head by saying that he came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life for many. Now, when you have a church and state married together for 1,700 years, being the most powerful nations on earth for most of the time, that whole idea gets lost. Jesus is lost in that. Rather, he becomes Pantokrator. He becomes the great power of control of the nations, such that the children in Native America were considered children, and were to be used as slaves because we had the true and most powerful religion. I regret that I have to admit that's in our history. So what Jesus taught, as the modern church teaches, that interpreted through the lens of Jesus' life, the word dominion becomes a call to serve, to manage, and be stewards of the gift of creation. It also has a justice element that all can share in its bounty and beauty. Dominion today is the dominion of justice, the dominion of stewardship. Finally, since I'm running out of time, I want to have a quote from Gus Speth, who co-founded the National Resources Defense Council and founded the World Resources Institute. He said, "I used to think the top environmental problems facing the world were global warming, environmental degradation, and ecosystem collapse," which they are there, "and that we scientists could fix those problems with enough science. But I was wrong. The real problem is not these three items, but greed, selfishness, and apathy. And for that, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation, and we scientists don't know how to do that." The ethics undergirding science itself is not strong enough to deal with the evil in human beings. Science has indeed contributed so much for the good of the world, but it is not science, but human beings, including scientists, including you and me, who use science for good and for evil. Religious traditions from all over the world provide a deeper ethic in meeting the crisis we face. They talk about the language of the heart. They talk about what ethical qualities are needed to meet the crisis. We need the science, but we need more than that. After all, the 20th century, the great scientific century, they call it, was marked by constant wars in which hundreds of millions of people were killed because their science had produced such efficient killing machines. So there's good science. Science itself is good. It's what people do with it. And how people do with it has to do with ethics, with values, the language of the heart, the things that are important for why you live. Thank you.
Wow. You have index cards. If you don't, Jeff is going to be bringing them around. Please jot down your questions for any one panelist or for everyone. We will have a good half hour to get into all this. Our next speaker is Orpheus Reed. He is a writer for Revolution newspaper. He has covered the anti-globalization movement and the environment, reporting on the Seattle World WTO protests, the Fukushima nuclear disaster, and the global climate crisis. In May 2010, he traveled to the Gulf region to report on the BP oil disaster, and in 2011, he participated in the mass civil disobedience against Keystone XL pipeline at the White House, which will be repeated bigger tomorrow. Reed was a contributor to the special issue of Revolution newspaper on the state of emergency, the plunder of our planet, the environmental catastrophe, and the real revolutionary solution.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm really glad to be here today, and I really want to thank the organizers for organizing this very important conference. When we look around our Earth today, we see ecosystems in deep trouble. We see an environmental emergency. Let's look. 2010, one of the hottest summers on record, causes higher temperatures in the Atlantic Ocean, fueling torrential monsoons. In Pakistan, people are swept into the floodwaters to drown by the thousands. 1/5 of the entire country is submerged underwater. 15 million people driven from their homes. That same summer, Russia suffers the worst heat wave in recorded history, killing thousands, sparking thousands of wildfires that even burn entire villages to the ground. Present-day Niger Delta. Over 50 years, 9 million barrels of oil, almost twice as much as the Gulf oil spill, have been spilled into the lands, waterways, and seas. People's drinking water, their farmlands, fishing, have been poisoned and ruined by spills over and over, and nothing is done. Many of the big capitalist oil companies, Shell, Chevron, etc., find it immensely profitable to extract oil from Nigeria, where they don't have to worry about any environmental regulations. And it is the US which is the main recipient of Nigerian crude. Indonesia, a world of tropical rainforest that's so rich in biological diversity, it has over 200 unique orchid species, immense varieties of birds, the last remaining orangutans on the planet, and an almost extinct species of rhinoceros. But within 20 years, it's predicted that these rainforests and these species will be gone. Why? Because US and European banks and their international financial institutions are financing the destruction of these rainforests to grow palm oil for the international market. Rich and unique life being wiped out, global warming fueled. And the US government and the military is right at the heart of what has fueled this destruction in Indonesia, backing military coups and dictatorships to enforce US strategic interests, drowning the people in blood, wiping out nature for profit. From the escalating melting of the Arctic to the nuclear disaster in Japan to the poisoning of the Gulf by BP, ecosystems are being transformed, undermined, and in some cases destroyed. Oceans are being acidified, natural habitat and species eliminated at an accelerating rate, water, air, and soils degraded and polluted, and then on top of this, interacting with all this, making it worse, the threat of unstoppable climate change, shockingly evidenced by Superstorm Sandy and the new normal of extreme weather disasters. People, we must hurry up and protect and preserve fast-vanishing natural ecosystems around the world, or we will likely witness before too long a series of domino effects, a qualitative unraveling and degeneration of the natural world on this planet. We must confront the full reality. Humanity is already well on its way to making this planet literally uninhabitable. But why is this happening? Why, when it's so clear that climate change threatens the entire future, is nothing of substance done by those in power? They have conference after conference, international conferences, talking about the danger, coming up with pledges and agreements, but nothing of substance is done to stop this. Meanwhile, this crisis keeps escalating. The ruling classes of these great powers are doing nothing of substance, not only because they won't, but because they can't. When they say, if we don't get that tar sands oil, China will get it, they mean it. But more, they're describing how their system actually operates. The current climate crisis is caused by human activity, not human activity in the abstract, but by the workings of the economic and the political system that dominates the world, capitalism, imperialism. Now, capitalism is a system that operates according to certain rules of the game. It's like basketball or soccer. If you grab the ball in soccer and you run down the field, the game stops, right? And they prevent you from doing that. Capitalism, too, has its rules that it operates under. And no, this is not just greed or the corporations. Individual corporations are involved, but the truth is that capitalism's very rules make it impossible for it as a system to deal with the environment in a sustainable and a rational way, even if an individual capitalist or group of them wanted to. So let's look at these rules. Rule number one, everything is a commodity, and everything must be done for profit. In fact, this is the measure of how things are produced and why. No matter what it is, food, medicine, clothing, housing, and profit comes from the exploitation of billions of people on this planet. Shell Oil spills oil for 50 years into the Niger Delta. They refuse to take any measures to stop this. Why? because they've calculated it's more profitable than replacing their old decaying infrastructure, and because they don't have to pay any price from environmental regulations. People dying from cancer, people poisoned, water poisoned, fish poisoned, lives ruined. None of this is part of their calculations because this is a profitable investment to them. Nature under capitalism is simply something to be seized and plundered, a free gift to be grabbed and poured into production for profit. Rule number 2, capitalist production is by its nature privately owned and driven forward by the commandment, expand or die. Each separate unit of ownership, Shell or BP, whatever, is fighting all the others to grow, to cheapen costs, to beat out the other before you get beaten out. Each unit is private and concerned with its own operation, its own profits, its own expansion. Now, when BP drilled 5 miles deep in the Gulf, they were concerned with the cost and the efficiency of their own operations and how to get that oil to market. But things outside that sphere of operation and ownership, the potential impacts to the Gulf ecosystem, were not part of their profit and loss ledgers. So they devised these phony oil spill cleanup and safety plans, approved, by the way, by the US government, including Obama's administration, from that foundation, and the result was the Gulf oil disaster. Capitalism is an anarchic system with short-term horizons. To capitalism, fish and coral reefs, whole ecosystems, whole peoples are outside their sphere, things that are of no concern to their economic functioning. Rule number 3, capitalism today is a global system and it proceeds through the domination of oppressed nations by imperialist countries. And this was powerfully spoken to by both Barney and Carl in terms of the indigenous people and the destruction that's gone on from the beginning of this system. And also through rivalry among these imperialist powers, including 2 world wars in the 20th century. Capitalist companies and countries are racing right now to grab cheap fossil fuel sources in oppressed countries, in Africa, Central Asia. And now, as the workings of this system are melting the Arctic, threatening global climatic change, ruining whole people's lives, what do? Do they throw all their resources into and mobilize science and people into saying, we're going to rush, we're going to stop fossil fuel extraction and burning and put in place new technologies? No. Instead, all the powerful capitalist countries in a position to benefit are maneuvering to seize on this melting as an opportunity to drill for more oil in the Arctic. An opportunity. And consider this, it is the US military that is the largest institutional consumer of oil in the world. Now, Bill McKibben has exposed that the capitalist energy companies of this planet already have plans to extract and burn 5 times more fossil fuels in the reserves that they already own than the upper limit that's set by climate scientists of what can be burned without causing truly devastating warming of the earth. Now, these reserves are still in the ground, but they're already part of the capitalist economy, figured into share prices, money being borrowed against it, nations basing their budgets on the returns. And now Obama has claimed in the State of the Union he would finally do more to combat climate change. Obama claims combating climate change is compatible with expanding oil and natural gas drilling to new levels. He calls for relying on the capitalist market and proceeding from the needs of US economic growth and interests. The very same things that have created this problem in the first damn place. The US has plans to sink its jaws into vast new fields of shale oil in the US itself, make itself the world's largest oil producer in the world. Think about that. Obama's not going to stop any of this or any of these plans for drilling every last bit of oil and gas. He's only talking about this now because he has to in order to keep people demobilized and prevented from acting against the interests of this system.
That's right.
For anyone to think that we can pressure or even force this system into becoming rational, time to wake up to reality. This system can't be made to act according to different rules than those that make it what it is, and that characterize the way the whole thing functions, even if these rules bring on an environmental catastrophe. This is horrific, but there's a way forward out of this environmental nightmare. Things don't have to be this way. We've got to really think about that. As Bob Avakian, the leader of the Revolutionary Communist Party, has said, quote, "Let's get down to basics. We need a revolution. Anything else in the final analysis is bullshit," unquote. The only viable way to deal with the environmental emergency is revolution, a socialist revolution that establishes a radically new and a different state power that unfolds its priorities from the needs of humanity and the planet's ecosystems. The ultimate goal of this revolution is communism, no more divisions among people, where some rule over and oppress others, denying them a decent life or the knowledge and the means to understand and change the world. Now, the Constitution for the new Socialist Republic in North America draft proposal, which people can get at Revolution Books table, from the Revolutionary Communist Party sets forth a vision and a plan for building a very different political, social, and economic system. This Constitution is based on Bob Avakian's new synthesis of communism, which opens the way to a world in which human beings can truly flourish. This is not a utopia. There will be enormous difficulties. There is the extreme depth and the pace of environmental destruction, for one. But on this question, with capitalism, we're sunk. With socialism moving to communism, we have a fighting chance. Unlike capitalism, a socialist system would not be hamstrung by the very laws of its operation, making it impossible to sustainably relate to the natural world. Now, this Constitution, as I said, this is based on a new synthesis of communism. It sets out how a new socialist society would, quote, apply itself to contributing all it can to solving the environmental crisis and, to the degree possible, reversing its terrible and manifold effects, and to ushering in a new era in which human beings and their society can truly be fit caretakers of the earth, unquote. This Constitution sets forth the principles and mechanisms for a liberating economy that meets the basic needs of people, including overcoming the inequalities between nationalities, between men and women, between those who mainly work with their hands and those who mainly promote and work in the realm of ideas. This is a society and an economy that will promote the world revolution to emancipate all of humanity from exploitation and oppression. And this is a society and economy that will be working to repair, to protect, and to enhance the ecosystems of this planet. Imagine a society for a minute where the land, the atmosphere, the oceans, and the rivers, the wild species, and the natural world are cherished, and where human beings are taught to protect and learn from all that nature has to teach. In the special issue of Revolution newspaper, Emergency, the Environmental Catastrophe, the Plunder of Our Planet, and the Real Revolutionary Solution, we put forward some key principles of socialist sustainable development for a new society to address this environmental crisis. You can pick this up at the Revolution Books table, or go on to revcom.us to see this too. In brief, these principles involve putting the preservation of ecosystems of the entire planet above the new society's own national development, sharing scientific knowledge and technology to tackle environmental problems worldwide, moving decisively away from reliance on fossil fuels and developing ecologically sound technology for real, developing sustainable cities full of life and culture, struggling against and moving away from consumerism, and decisively breaking with exploitation of the world's people for the needs of a small, privileged minority in the U.S. All this is possible, and there is a plan and a leadership for getting there. I want to call on people to deeply engage, join with this movement for revolution we're building on whatever level you agree with it now, as you learn more, and also bring your questions and your disagreements right into it. If you care about saving the environment, go to see the film Bob Avakian Speaks, BA Speaks, Revolution, Nothing Less. And people have got the card for that, I think. You can talk to people at Rev Books table. I'm almost done about that. Lastly, it's urgent that we build serious mass resistance to the destruction of the environment wrought by this system. This resistance has to be aimed at actually stopping this shit.
Yes.
stopping fracking, stopping the Keystone Pipeline, the tar sands, the destruction of species, the burning of fossil fuels. Mass resistance aimed at doing what is necessary to turn this situation around and stop this. Not doing a little bit better. This is what the situation demands, a global emergency response, not tinkering around the edges. Now, the Revolutionary Communist Party has a strategy for revolution, and a key part of that is the orientation, fight the power, transform the people for revolution. The more this resistance that's built is connected to building a movement for revolution and all the other types of resistance that people are building up as part of this movement for revolution, the more it will be building for what will fundamentally transform everything. Nothing less than revolution, and a new society has a chance to even seriously address, not to mention solve, this environmental crisis. So join together with us to make this revolution real and save the future for humanity and for our planet. Thank you very much.
What revolutionary approaches are you seeing now and in the future that give you the most hope for a healthier and more sustainable future? What do you say to people who say it's too late? How would our speakers respond to that?
Well, if it were really too late, if it were really too late, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I'd be down in the last vestiges of my homeland doing what a Native American does best, and that's kind of sitting around eating a lot of fry bread and wondering where the commodities are. We kind of have that kind of attitude toward what we have down there now. And why not? If it's the end and there's no hope, then I can't do that no hope thing. I'm ever hopeful. Ever hopeful. This is the homeland. This is the homeland. You know, Chicago gets its word from the Potawatomis, you know. Chicago guay, it means where skunks pee. I just wanted to bring that up.
That's a great question. I think that there are communities that engender hope. I would say a number of them would be religious communities that are in tune with the crisis that we are facing. That's really their job, is through history, where civilizations collapsed. And I actually think this one is going to be unsustainable as it's going, and it's going to fall apart. That's what religious communities have been, a place that keeps people hopeful even in the darkest of times.
This is a very important question, I think, and it's part of also what holds people back. I mean, I think there is hope. There is cause for hope, but there's cause for hope not just because we have to hope, but because there's actually a material foundation to have a different kind of world and a different society. Things do not have to be this way. Now, in terms of this crisis, we have to be real, right? We can't pretend that, oh, it'll be okay. We can't pretend that, well, it's not extremely serious. This is an emergency. As Mark's talk pointed out, right, as this talk pointed out, we don't know exactly where we are in terms of and climate change. Like, where are we exactly in relation to these tipping points? We know that these tipping points could happen now. We could be past certain tipping points already, honestly, you know. So we do know that with the trajectory of things as it is now, business as usual, capitalism in full swing, everything that it's doing, right, this is going to mean tremendous destruction to this planet, to whole ecosystems, to potentially the ability for humanity to survive on this planet, right? This is potentially in play, right? And we have to really look at this and we have to confront this. But there is a way out, right? We know that if we don't do anything, we're to put it shortly, right? But there is a way out. Things don't have to be this way. We can have a different society, and there is actually a plan and thinking and leadership in terms of this new synthesis that I'm talking about that really is visionary and viable in terms of being able to deal with this crisis in an entirely different way And it's not magic. It's not like, well, we have a revolution, we put in place socialism, and the environmental disaster goes away. No, right? We don't, but there's tremendous destruction that's already occurring.
That's right.
That's going to continue to occur. But if we don't make this revolution, you know, and we don't do it as soon as we possibly can. I mean, we have to work for the conditions and build this movement for revolution right now, not wait for things, right? But if we don't do this, then there's no real future. And I personally don't believe that all of life will be wiped out, even if humans destroy themselves. I think life will continue in some forms, and then evolution will occur on that basis. But we don't want to see this. This is caused by the workings of human society. It's our responsibility to do something about this. And I think there's a reason to really see and believe that we can do tremendous things to change this, to address this crisis, and do things in a whole different way. I mean, imagine a society that relates to nature in a totally different way. I mean, it's disgusting, the kinds of things that we've even seen here today and people have talked about. We can do much better as humanity, and there's very, you know, very good, solid material reasons to believe that there's a lot we can do to solve this.
We have so many good questions, it's really hard to pick them out. There's a couple groups of questions, so let's go with a few here. We've got about 25 minutes left. These have to do with capitalism, socialism, communism. You talk about capitalism. These are for everyone. Capitalism and domination, but what about the achievements and the success of the system? What about education? On the other hand, what happened to communist Russia? Are you totally mad? It showed that people are dispensable. And to Barney, do you think that a European-derived political system like socialism could really be the answer? Basically, questions along those lines. Isn't there a good side to capitalism, and isn't there a bad side to communist revolution?
Go ahead.
Oh, and here, well, this is right along. I believe that revolution is the answer, but do we have time?
It's a good question.
Well,
that's for everyone.
That relates to the. I mean, that relates to the last question too. I think of. Do we have time? Yes, I think we have time. There's not a scientific indication that it's too late. There's not a preponderance of scientific evidence that says it's too late, give it up, you know, party till it's 1999, as they used to say. There's not a preponderance of evidence that says that. I mean, again, this is not a linear progression. You know, there's leaps involved in this environmental emergency. There's tipping points involved. We have to act quickly. Right? We can't wait for revolution. We have to act now to build a movement for revolution right now and build mass resistance as a key part of that. Force them back on every single thing that we can force them back on, but connect it to doing away with the system that's the cause of it. Because if we don't do that, we don't have a viable future. Now, in terms of this, I think this question about communism, you know, I've never heard that before. No, I'm kidding. No, I mean, I think the thing is, here's the basic thing. You've been lied to about communism, okay? And you've been lied to by the very same people that are compelling us to meet here today, essentially, to look at this question, forcing us to deal with what their system has developed and what they're lying about that it has developed this situation. So that's number one. We should get into this experience because mainly this experience was a liberating experience for people. In the Soviet Union, yes, but even more so in China. If you look at the old, I mean, we can talk about this a lot, and we should, in terms of the old Soviet society and what the new society made. This was the first experience in revolution. There were tremendous necessities and contradictions that they faced, including being invaded by 17 countries immediately, including facing World War right out of basically establishing this new thing. And there were big problems in this. There were big problems in methodology and even grievous errors that were made in this revolution. I mean, China went much further in terms of learning from that experience, right? And we should remember some of the things people may not know about Chinese society, not today. Chinese society today is a capitalist country. China today is a capitalist country. Revolution has been overthrown in the 1970s. In the 1960s and 70s, people who are older here may remember, if you looked at Chinese society, people mainly, their transportation was by bicycle, right? This was the model in China. They were not about developing a whole mass consumer culture. They were about developing a sustainable society, economy, and culture that relied on the masses of people. And there were really tremendous things that were done as part of this revolution, including uplifting women, major steps to overcoming oppression of people in China. I mean, the people in old Chinese society, there were times when the peasants ate bark because there was no food. 80% of the people. I'll stop. You're right. I should stop. Okay. I could go on and on with this. But I think the thing is, just to end, I know you don't want to hear it, but just let me finish. Just to end, there is a new synthesis of communism. And I want to say that it's not like the best of what was done in the socialist countries is anywhere near what's needed now. We face a whole different situation. The understanding and the methodology to deal with these problems is on entirely in a more scientific level to be able to address them now. Yeah.
I don't have any commitment to any kind of social structure, really. After having an institutional church behind us for so long, it's done so much damage. I'm inclined to think that the notion of a communist, unless it's different from what I have perceived, is just another form of imperialism on a master scale of social control and structure. And I don't know if that's fair, but my job is to question assumptions, okay, too. So that's kind of my response, with respect.
The oldest form of government in the world that has existed since the beginning of time and still exists today in smaller areas is tribalism. That is the oldest form of government. People don't recognize that as a form of government, but the term communism is a dirty word in America. I've heard it before, and I hear people associate it with some of the worst characters coming out of World War I and World War II. And I've read about communism, and I've read the definition of communism several times, an idealistic kind of definition, I might add. And it's a definition that parallels itself in the sense of tribalism, but I kind of agree that I don't know that any one government, I can't perceive any one government being in control of this country. But the thing is, as Native people, we've lost control here in this country, except now we have a financial control. You can see President Obama out, shaking hands and wearing war bonnets and all that stuff with the casino tribes. Well, of course, that's where money is now. And are the casino tribes helping us buy back our homelands? Are we repurchasing waterways and making parks? Some are actually. And some are increasing, herds of buffalo and doing all kinds of environmental kinds of things. But I don't see any one government. I don't trust them. I do not trust any of these governments. I think, financially speaking, everyone has an angle of some sort. I can see in this man here that I see a sense of trust, a sense of voice, and a sense of purpose in this man. And I like how he sounds. But then the sounds of what we call democracy and the sounds of those things that came into the Americas, that was not democracy. The kinds of things that the Iroquois people are alleged to have given to Ben Franklin and those people from the true democracy of what the Iroquois fantasized themselves as having had, and representative government and all that sort of thing. I don't see humans civilized enough around the earth to be able to acclimate themselves to any one sort of government in mass where the environment is respected. I see too much. I see too much accumulation and greed in the world to accommodate that. But I do see, and I do agree with, the concept of revolution. Anything, I will do almost anything to preserve what's left of my homeland. And that means, yeah, it means the ultimate sacrifice if I have to do that. You know, I have ancestors that have already gone on in this life. And I'm not afraid of death. I'm not afraid of it at all. Don't want to sound like Martin Luther King, but I spend a lot of time in the woods. I spend a lot of times in the hills, and I spend a lot of time in what we have left of sacred spots, of contemplating all of this and what's left for us here.
Okay, thank you. We have, oh, there's so many good questions. Can we talk about what each of us can do today? There's several questions in that direction. What about reinvesting all the money in retirement accounts, the personal divestment from fossil fuels? What about, this slightly prejudiced question, what are your opinions on Al Gore's solutions through innovation by expanding the neoliberal political economy into Earth Inc.?
That's a failed.
Not a subtle question, whoever wrote that.
That's really
so what can we do today? What about some of these forms that are on the table? We're going to be getting into some of this in depth in the breakout sessions after 1 o'clock. So those of you who want to get into, I hope everyone wants to get into how do we take this on in depth. We will be getting into that. But basically, how does this whole political discussion connect to what are we going to do now?
One of the things that the public could do is to somehow or another get Obama off to the side and have him stop subsidizing $53 to $83 billion to the coal mines, to the frackers, to the uranium developers, to the mountaintop removal people, and stop that nonsense if he's going to have any, if he's going to have anything, if he's going to say anything about his place in office and how he's going to be remembered, because everybody that gets in office wants their face in the history books, you know, as having, you know, crossed the Delaware or something. So this is one thing that they could do, and that money could be reinvested sensibly. We could take those strip mines. We got pockets of strip mines down in southern Illinois, just waste sites, you know, because you can't use that land for anything again, but you could use part of that money for restoration, take some of the money and put some limestone in some of the water to clear out the sulfur. We could level those places off and put solar panels on there. You could provide one of the largest solar generating stations in all of Illinois by down there. The other Illinois, by the way, that's south of here. And that would provide energy to tens of thousands of people. That could be done. That could be done. That's practical and that's very real. And the jobs it would provide for all those people, little jobs. I hear that blowhardy kind of inbred kind of, oh, what about jobs, you know? But to use the destruction of the earth as a means to provide jobs for a business that it's terminal. That's a terminal business. Terminal. Solar, as far as we know, is for a lot longer than the coal. It'll last a lot longer than, and so will the wind, hopefully. But as the man here was saying, that's not going to happen if they continue on the path that they're on now, unless there is a revolution. It's immediate. It's immediate. Our homelands are in danger down here. We have to do something, and we have to do something. It's now.
Okay. Bob? Orpheus?
I mean, I think, you know, I have some agreement with some of what Barney is laying out. I think we have to look at all these things that people do, you know, everything from recycling to, I mean, there's tremendous desire that people have to stop this, right, and to do something, to contribute. This is potentially a really good thing, but honestly, under this system, it's not going to go anywhere. I mean, there was a statistic that really hit me from Oil Change International. They put out in 2004 that the amount of oil used by the U.S. military in the Iraq War alone, not all their other operations, in the Iraq War alone in that year was the equivalent of putting 25 million new cars on the road in the U.S. See, this should really put in perspective this idea of everybody operating on their own, trying to do their own little thing. No, we need a different framework. We need a different society. We need a revolution, as Barney is saying. And if within this new framework we can have a flourishing of people's desires, and you can actually do something. Imagine that. All the things that you really want to do in terms of stopping this destruction and committing yourself to it can be done if you're not hamstrung from the very beginning by a system that's laws or work against that. So, but again, we can't wait for that. We do have to take up these struggles right now. We have to support people fighting to stop fracking. We got to make that a question. This is going on all over the U.S. We have to support people who are fighting against the destruction of their lands in Alaska. We got to make these questions. We got to go out into society and kick up a storm about this stuff. We got to take it into every single avenue, onto the campuses, into where basic people live, out into society, bring people into the streets. We need people in the streets against this stuff. How about an Earth Day this year that instead of people coming and talking about sustainability fairs and bicycling and worm bins, says we need to go into the streets to stop the climate crisis. We need to go into the streets to stop the environmental emergency and what this system is bringing. We need to do that, you know, and we need to go, you know, we need more resistance like some of what's happening in D.C., but it needs to go further. It can't be aimed at like, well, let's pressure Obama. Let's try to get him. He is not our friend, people. He is not our friend. He is here to fool people into accepting what this system has done. Look what he's done in terms of where people are at, where you have Hollywood people now who are liberals making positive movies about the CIA. Has people forgotten what the CIA is? That's what Obama has brought. He's bringing people into not resisting these crimes, but embracing them. And it's the same deal with the environment. We've got to go outside that framework, and we've got to rely on ourselves. We've got to rely on the people, bring forward that mass resistance. There's a lot of strategizing to be done around that.
And we are going to be doing some serious strategizing this afternoon in many different forms. I'm going to do one last question. We've got 5 minutes. This is, I think, is a softball. But I think it's very important. This is for everybody. How do you see the role of art and the arts in this struggle? And I think that's very related to another question about how do we change the consciousness? How do we talk to the American people? The Christians, the SUV drivers, how do you change the conversation?
Okay,
I mean, that's facing all of us, isn't it?
One of the things that doesn't happen much in a colonial country is the truth. You have to know that the coal that comes out of the southern part of the Midwest is so choked full of sulfur that actually the EPA thinks it does an effective preventative of burning it here in the United States. And over half of it gets mixed in with other coal that comes from Wyoming and other places too. That's part of the mafioso of the coal industry. And the other half goes to China. And it goes into steel plants that were created by the United States. Now get this. This is one of the things, you know, in changing people's attitudes, because they get all panicky, at least down in southern Illinois, when I've used the word treasonous. The coal goes into steel plants that make steel, in which the Chinese use into making weapons that are sold to the countries with whom the U.S. is at war. So you say, well, and I had this discussion with a dispatcher at the police station here not long ago, and he's, but it's providing jobs. I don't want you to call me treasonous, but this provides, my daddy was a coal mine, and I said, yeah, well, that coal's going to China, and it's making weapons that are being used to kill the boys. You know, down that part of the world, they like to use our boys overseas, and they don't give a damn about those boys. They don't, the whole system doesn't care about the lives of these people that are going over to fight. How many times, oh, I'm getting off. I'm going off on that.
Well, it is all connected.
But that is a tragedy. I mean, that coal is being used to make steel that makes weapons that kill Americans who are invading somebody else's country. Yeah. Well, the one thing that I propose, and you say about the arts, I have advocated that we have a mass movement, as he's speaking here, but mass movements that hit the CEOs of Peabody, Eau Claire, the uranium, the mountaintop removers and all that outfit, because they just changed their names, so that they can declare bankruptcy and not have to do the repair work. To hit those offices and their board of directors and the people with whom they do business. If we've got the gumption to boycott those businesses, the only thing that I can see to do in America without killing masses of people or getting masses of people killed, and by the way, in this change of times, people will die. I guarantee you, people will die. And here's the thing, if you can get those, send letters to their offices to flood their telephones, their computers, daily, 24 hours a day, and boycott those businesses. And that, to find out who the CEOs and the board of trustees, those people, they all have to pay for what they've done. Each time that they clink a glass in their room saying, oh, wasn't it something how we got by on those people and we get to pollute another 1,000,000 acres today? I want those people, I want them to feel some pain. They deserve to feel some pain. And yes, the arts are essential in this time. Filmmaking, all the arts that we can do, that whether it's painting or film or plays or that sort of thing. If we had mass productions of those kinds of things on stages around major cities in America, and especially small cities. If we get the Illinois Arts Council and some of the other councils to fund some of these artist troupes out of Chicago or whatever to take trips to I'm going on, but I think you get the picture.
Yeah. Just a last comment from Bob and then Orpheus.
You got good ideas, Barney. And I'm thankful also, Barney, that you quoted from Scripture, too. From the book of Revelation. There are other texts in Scripture that speak with judgment, and the context of the book of Revelation is not predicting the future. This is all that people with half an education do. It's about a time of absolute doom. Diocletian the emperor has decided to wipe out the Christian movement because it's a threat, a revolutionary threat to his empire. And so you had no rights, and you had no weapons. People were being rounded up and executed summarily all the time. That was when that book was written, and that's the context for that book. It's a great book for a time when things are full of doom. And I must say that we will hear this, and we have to face the fact there is a bit of doom in this context. But it's not all that. And the greatest educator from doom is despair. And we will often ourselves say, how the hell, oh, excuse me, how the heck, how are we going to overdo this when you've got ExxonMobil and Chevron funding a climate denial group?
That's right.
How are we going to do this when the Congress is bought off? How are we going to do this? And it gives us a sense of despair. Well, it's in despair that faith comes, whatever your faith is. It's in despair when you rise above that despair, you now are living with a deeper sense of your existence and the importance of our world. So bring the doom on, but we have some strength in ourselves and in our faiths to counter that and bring change.
Well, the trajectory is not good, but the other side of it is everything that this system is doing in terms of what it's doing has the potential to bring forward its opposite. In terms of, you look at the destruction of the environment. This is affecting the entire planet, right? There's tremendous potential and basis for people to oppose this, to be brought into opposition to it. We need to work on doing that, right? But we've got to look at every other question. You look at the way the system dealt with Superstorm Sandy and what that represented. you know, and the potential that people have within that to try to help themselves and organize themselves that's held back by the system, or what it did in Hurricane Katrina. These things are jolts that are happening constantly. The system, by its very workings, by its very nature, it can't do what it can't do. You know, it does what the rules require it to do over and over again. That's what it has to do, and that means tremendous destruction, tremendous upheaval. But the opposite side of that is that it's not in the interests of humanity. We've got to go to humanity. We've got to tell the truth. I agree. We've got to tell the truth to people. We have to challenge people's assumptions. We have to break them out of like lining up to get iPods but not giving them. This country is torturing people and renditioning people. People can't stand up for that. You know, they can't stand up when 4,000 people are killed by drones, right? But they can line up for the iPod. We've got to challenge that. Not just tell people you're an asshole, but we've got to go out and challenge that. You know, challenge the assumptions and bring forward something different. Bring forward actual resistance and an actual picture of how a new society could function and possible. And just one last thing, you know, this question of communism, people should really engage with this, at least. You know, even if you disagree, you should engage with it, and you should check out this film that's coming up, which is March 16th and 17th, BA Speaks. People should go to that and really bring your thinking and your agreements and your disagreements to that.
Thank you.